More than 55 million people worldwide are living with dementia right now. Every 3 seconds, somewhere in the world, someone new is diagnosed. And for decades, scientists knew that toxic proteins were building up inside the brains of Alzheimer's patients, destroying neurons, dismantling memory, erasing the person inside. What they didn't know was exactly how those proteins were actually killing brain cells, the precise mechanism of destruction. That question has driven some of the most intense research in the history of medicine. And in the last 2 weeks of June and July 2026, it may finally have been answered, not once, but multiple times, by multiple teams, working independently. And what they found changes everything we thought we knew. To understand why these discoveries matter, you need to understand what Alzheimer's actually does. The disease is characterized by the buildup of 2 toxic proteins in the brain: amyloid beta, which forms sticky plaques between neurons, and tau, which forms tangles inside neurons themselves. For decades, scientists believed that if they could just clear these proteins, the disease would stop. Billions of dollars were spent on drugs designed to remove amyloid plaques. Most of them failed. Not because the idea was wrong, but because removing the proteins didn't stop the dying, which meant something else, something hidden, was doing the killing. Something that was happening after the proteins arrived, but before the brain cells died. A mechanism nobody had identified, until now. On the 26th of June, 2026, researchers at King's College London and the UK Dementia Research Institute published findings that identified a previously overlooked process of brain cell death. They called it Karyoptosis. For decades, scientists had known that toxic proteins build up in the brains of people living with Alzheimer's disease, but exactly how this leads to the death of brain cells had remained unclear. Karyoptosis is the answer. A specific process, triggered by the toxic protein buildup, that causes the nucleus of a neuron to be expelled from the cell. When the nucleus goes, the cell dies. And it appears to play a major role not just in Alzheimer's, but in frontotemporal dementia and potentially ALS. The finding could lead to new treatments aimed at slowing neuron loss by interrupting the process before cells are destroyed. But the King's College discovery was not the only breakthrough. On the 30th of June, 2026, researchers at the University of Utah published a separate finding that may explain how Alzheimer's spreads through the brain. A protein called ARC, which normally helps neurons communicate with each other, appears to also help toxic tau protein travel from diseased brain cells into healthy ones. It is carried inside tiny packages called extracellular vesicles, almost like a Trojan horse. Healthy neurons absorb what they think is a normal communication package and receive a lethal payload instead. As this harmful protein moves into new areas of the brain, the disease progresses, leading to worsening memory loss and cognitive decline. But if ARC is the vehicle, then blocking ARC might stop the spread. And there was more. Earlier in 2026, scientists at Heidelberg University identified what they called a death complex inside Alzheimer's brains. A specific molecular interaction between 2 proteins, NMDA receptors and TRPM4, that forms outside synapses and kills nerve cells. When NMDA receptors function inside synapses, they support neuron survival and maintain cognitive function. But when TRPM4 interacts with NMDA receptors outside synapses, it changes their behavior in a harmful way. Together they form a death complex that can damage and kill nerve cells. The death complex appeared at much higher levels in Alzheimer's mice compared to healthy ones. The researchers found that blocking TRPM4 prevented the complex from forming and prevented the cell death that followed. A potential drug target, a potential way in. Here is perhaps the most hopeful finding of all. On the 3rd of July 2026, Scientists discovered why some brains appear to resist Alzheimer's entirely. Some brains fight back against Alzheimer's by helping immature brain cells survive damage instead of succumbing to it. Understanding this natural resilience could point researchers toward entirely new ways to protect memory and slow decline. And separately, another study found that a cleanup system exists inside certain neurons, a natural mechanism that removes toxic tau protein before it can cause damage. Some brains have it, some don't. The question researchers are now racing to answer is this: can we give it to the ones that don't? Put all of this together, and the picture changes dramatically. For 50 years, the dominant theory was that Alzheimer's was fundamentally a disease of protein buildup. Remove the proteins, stop the disease. It didn't work. What the 2026 research suggests is that Alzheimer's is better understood as a disease of cell death mechanisms. The proteins are the trigger, but karyoptosis, ARC-mediated spread, the NMDA TRPM4 death complex, these are the weapons. And weapons can be disarmed. Blocking the ARC protein, inhibiting TRPM4, targeting the karyoptosis pathway. Multiple potential drugs, multiple potential targets. None of them existed as viable avenues 18 months ago. All of them exist now. Almost half of all dementia cases worldwide could be prevented or delayed by addressing known risk factors. Staying physically active, remaining socially connected, managing blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar. These things are known, they work. And now, for the first time in a long time, the science of what happens when prevention isn't enough is accelerating faster than at any point in history. Multiple independent research teams identifying multiple new mechanisms in the same 2-week window. That is not a coincidence. That is momentum. 55 million people are living with dementia today. The goal is to make sure that number is lower tomorrow. And for the first time in decades, there is genuine, documented, scientific reason to believe that it can be. If this gave you hope, or helped you understand something that touches your life, you're in exactly the right place. We cover the most important breakthroughs in science every single week. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, and we'll see you in the next one.